Today we're zeroing in on something really fundamental in image editing. Selections.
Absolutely essential.
Yeah, like, have you ever wanted to just change one little part of a photo? Brighten a face, maybe, but not the background? Or, I don't know, change a shirt color?
That's exactly it. Selections are how you tell the software, hey, only edit this specific spot.
It gives you that control, right? Defining exactly where your changes happen.
Crucial control. Without it, any adjustment, well, it just hits the whole image. Selections let you be surgical.
It's the starting point for so much, isn't it? Masks, targeted adjustments.
Pretty much foundational for any kind of complex editing, yeah.
So for this deep dive, we've looked at a bunch of stuff, some YouTube tutorials showing specific tools and Photoshop elements, and also some guides explaining the sort of why and how of making selections.
The good mix of the practical and the conceptual.
Exactly. And our goal today is really for you listening to get a really solid handle on selections, what they are, why they matter, and what tools you actually have available.
And hopefully without making it sound too complicated.
Right. We want to keep it practical, not just what a tool does, but like when would you actually use this one instead of that one?
Makes sense. So maybe start at the beginning. What is a selection, fundamentally?
Okay, yeah. So simply put, it's about isolating a part of your image, right?
Isolating, yeah. You draw a boundary. Everything inside that boundary can be edited. Everything outside is protected.
And you see those marching ants, the blinking dotted line.
That's the classic visual cue. Tells you exactly what's selected.
And once that selection's active, it really does act like a shield for the rest of the picture.
Yeah.
I saw one tutorial where they tried painting across the line.
And nothing happens outside the ant.
Exactly. Or applying a filter only works inside. It's like an invisible stencil.
That's a great analogy. And this targeted editing, it's key for a few things. Limiting adjustments, obviously.
Right.
But also, it's how you create layer masks, which are super important for non-destructive editing.
Because you can always change the mask later, unlike just erasing pixels.
Precisely. Masks just hide or show parts of the layer. Selections are often the first step to making a good mask. And of course, you need selections to copy, move, or delete just part of an image.
Okay, so we get the what and the why. Let's get into the tools themselves. The sources pointed to the basic geometric ones first, the marquee tools.
Yeah, the marquees. They're your go-to for regular shapes. Squares, rectangles, circles, ellipses.
So the first one is the rectangular marquee tool.
Right. For anything square or rectangular. And when you pick it, you usually get options up top. Normal is just, drag whatever size rectangle you want.
Freeform.
Freeform, exactly. But then there's fixed aspect ratio. Let's say you need a 4:6 selection. You set that ratio.
And it stays 4:6 no matter how big or small you drag it.
Exactly. Super useful for cropping to standard print sizes or maintaining proportions. And then there's fixed size.
Where you type in the exact pixel dimensions.
Yep. You specify, say, 500 pixels by 300 pixels before you click, and boom, that's the size you get. Very precise.
And the elliptical marquee tool is basically the same idea, but for round shapes.
You got it. Circles, ovals, same modes. Normal, fixed aspect ratio, fixed size. Works just like the rectangular one, just rounder.
Makes drawing a perfect circle way easier than trying it freehand, I bet.
Oh, absolutely. Saves a lot of frustration.
And you mentioned earlier seeing how the selection protects the outside. That paintbrush example really drove it home.
It's fundamental. The selection is a boundary. But it's also important to know the difference between moving the selection outline itself.
The marching ants.
Right. Moving just the ants versus moving the actual pixels inside the ants.
Ah, okay. So how does that work?
Well, if you have a marquee tool active, you can usually click inside the selection and drag the outline around without changing the image underneath.
Repositioning the boundary.
Exactly. But to move the actual image content within that boundary, you'd typically switch to the Move tool after making the selection.
Okay, so select first, then switch tools to move the content. Got it. That's a key distinction.
It trips people up sometimes.
All right, moving on from basic shapes. What about irregular stuff, the lasso tools?
Yes, the lasso family. For when things aren't neat squares or circles, the basic lasso tool is pure freehand.
Just click and draw.
Click, hold, and draw your outline. It follows your mouse exactly. Great for tracing really complex organic shapes.
But I imagine you need a steady hand.
Oh, yeah. Drawing smooth curves with a mouse can be challenging. Takes practice. Or maybe a drawing tablet helps there.
Okay, then there's the polygonal lasso tool. That sounds different.
It is. Instead of dragging, you click. Each click sets down a corner point, like connecting the dots.
With straight lines between the clicks.
Exactly. Perfect for things with straight edges. Buildings, boxes, geometric designs, click, click, click around on the shape, and then click back on the starting point to close it.
So mostly for straight lines. But one source mentioned a trick.
Ah, right. If you zoom way in and make lots of very short clicks close together, you can actually sort of approximate a curve.
Oh, interesting. Like tiny little straight segments making up a curve.
Yeah, it takes a bit more time, but it gives you control even on slightly rounded corners if you need it with this tool.
Clever. Okay, and the third lasso, the magnetic lasso tool. Sounds kind of smart.
It tries to be. The magnetic lasso attempts to automatically snap to edges as you move your mouse near them.
How does it know where the edge is?
It looks for contrast. Differences in color or brightness between pixels. It assumes high contrast means an edge.
So you just drag roughly along the edge, and it should stick.
Ideally, yes. It can be a huge time saver on objects with really clear, well-defined edges against a different background.
Are there settings for it?
Yep. In the options bar, you'll usually find contrast, how much difference it needs to see to detect an edge. Frequency controls how often it puts down those little anchor points as you drag.
More points means it follows curves better, maybe?
Potentially, yeah. And sometimes there's a feather option, too, to soften the edge slightly right from the start.
Does it always work perfectly?
Not always. If the edge is blurry or if the subject and background colors are too similar, it can get confused and wander off.
So you might need to clean it up.
Often, yeah. You can also click manually with the magnetic lasso to force an anchor point in tricky spots like sharp corners or to correct where it went wrong.
Okay, now, with all these lassos and maybe the marquees too, you're not stuck with the first selection you draw, right? You can change it.
Definitely not stuck. Most selection tools have modes in the options bar. New selection is the default starts a fresh one.
Replaces the old one.
Right. But then there's add to selection. It looks like a plus sign usually, lets you draw another area, and it gets merged with what you already have selected.
So you can build up a complex shape bit by bit.
Exactly. And subtract from selection, the minus sign lets you draw over parts you want to remove from the selection. Great for cleaning up edges or cutting holes.
And intersect.
Intersect is interesting. You draw a new selection, and it keeps only the part where the new selection overlaps with the old one. Everything else disappears.
I can see how combining those, adding, subtracting, would be really powerful for getting tricky shapes just right.
Absolutely crucial. You rarely get a perfect selection on the first try with complex subjects.
Okay, let's talk about the edges themselves. Sometimes a sharp edge looks wrong. Feathering. What's that about?
Feathering basically softens the edge of your selection. It creates a gradual blend or fade between the selected pixels and the unselected ones around them.
Instead of a hard cut-out line.
Exactly. Think about putting someone from one photo into another background. A sharp edge often looks fake. Feathering helps blend them in more naturally.
Or like those old portraits with the soft, hazy edges.
Yeah, vignette effects, soft transitions, that's often feathering.
So how do you do it? The sources mentioned a couple of ways. One was setting a feather value before you select.
Right, some tools like the marquees and lassos have a feather box in their options. You type in a pixel value, say 5 pixels or 10 pixels.
And the higher the number, the softer the edge.
Correct. A higher number means a wider transition zone. The downside is you have to decide on the amount before you make the selection.
And you can't easily change it afterwards.
Not really. You'd have to undo, change the feather value, and redraw the selection. It's less flexible.
So what's the more flexible way? Something about layer masks?
Yes, that's generally the recommended method for more control. You make your selection with the sharp edge first, 0 feather.
Okay.
Then you create a layer mask from that selection. Remember, the mask is black and white, white reveals, black conceals.
Right.
Now, instead of feathering the selection itself, you apply a blur filter, usually Gaussian blur, directly to the layer mask.
Ah, so you're blurring the mask, not the image pixels.
Exactly. Blurring the mask creates shades of gray along the edge, which translates into that soft, gradual transition in the image itself.
And the big advantage is?
You can adjust the amount of blur on the mask non-destructively anytime you want. If it's too soft or not soft enough, just reapply the blur with a different setting. Much more control.
That sounds way better.
Yeah.
More forgiving.
It really is. That's why pros tend to prefer the mask and blur method.
Okay, so we've made a selection, maybe feathered it. What if we need to tweak the boundary slightly? The select menu has stuff for that.
Oh yeah, the select menu is command central for selections. You've got the basics like select all, grabs the whole canvas.
Obvious enough.
Deselect, which you'll use constantly. The shortcut Ctrl plus D or Command plus D is worth memorizing. Gets rid of the marching ants.
Essential.
Reselect is handy, brings back the last selection you just deselected. Saves you if you accidentally hit deselect.
Oh, that's useful.
And inverse is super powerful. It flips the selection, everything selected becomes unselected, and everything unselected becomes selected.
So if it's easier to select the background, you can do that, then inverse to get the subject.
Precisely, a very common technique.
And there's a modify submenu in there too.
Correct. Under select modify, you've got tools like expand and contract.
What do they do?
Expand grows your selection boundary outwards by a number of pixels you specify, makes the selected area bigger.
And contract shrinks it inwards.
Yep, by a set number of pixels. Really useful for fine-tuning, like if your selection is just slightly off, or if you want a border effect.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what about saving selections? Why would you do that?
Saving selections is a lifesaver for complex work. Imagine spending ages carefully selecting something intricate, like hair.
Yeah, that sounds tedious.
You wouldn't want to do that twice. So you
Yeah.
go to select, save selection, give it a name.
Like person's hair.
Exactly. And it stores that selection outline. Later, if you need it again, you just go to select load selection, pick the name, and bam, it's back.
That's incredibly useful. Does it just load it or can you combine it?
Good question. When you load, it usually asks how you want to load it. As a new selection, or you can add it to, subtract it from, or intersect it with whatever selection is currently active. So very flexible.
Wow, okay. That covers a lot of ground on managing selections. Let's switch gears a bit. Paint-based selection tools.
Right. These feel a bit more like brushing. The quick selection tool is a big one here.
How's it quick?
Well, you use a round brush tip, and as you paint or drag over an area, it tries to intelligently find edges based on color and texture similarity.
So it sort of expands automatically as you paint.
Yeah, it finds similar nearby pixels that seem to belong to the same object. You don't have to trace the edge perfectly. The tool helps figure it out.
That sounds pretty smart. Can you adjust the brush?
Oh, yeah. Size, hardness, all the usual brush settings. And you have modes in the options bar, new, add to, subtract from, just like the others.
So you can paint to add areas or hold a key like Alt-Option to paint away parts.
Exactly. There's often an auto-enhance checkbox too, which tries to smooth the edges a bit. And crucially, a refine edge button.
We'll probably need to talk about refine edge separately. Sounds important.
It is. It opens a whole dedicated dialogue for perfecting tricky edges like hair or fur.
Okay. And the other paint-based one? The selection brush tool?
That one's even more direct. You literally just paint the area you want selected. Where you paint becomes selected.
So it doesn't do the automatic edge finding like quick selection.
Not really, no. It's more like using a regular paintbrush, but instead of color, you're painting a selection area.
When would you use that?
It's really good for refining selections made with other tools. Say, quick selection missed a spot, you grab the selection brush in add mode and just paint that bit in. Or switch to subtract mode to paint away areas that were wrongly included.
So more for touch-ups and fine control.
Often, yes. You control the brush size, you paint exactly where you want to add or remove. Very precise manual control.
Makes sense. Okay, different approach again.
Yeah.
Color, the magic wand tool.
Ah, the classic magic wand. This one works purely based on color similarity. You click on a pixel.
And it selects other pixels that are the same or very similar in color.
Exactly. The key setting here is tolerance. It's a number usually in the options bar.
What does tolerance control?
It controls how much variation in color the wand will accept. A low tolerance, like 5 or 10, means it only selects colors very close to the one you clicked. Very strict.
And a high tolerance.
A higher tolerance, maybe 50 or 100, selects a much broader range of related colors. It's less picky. The default is often around 32 or 35.
So you adjust tolerance depending on how uniform the color area is.
Precisely. Great for selecting solid backgrounds, blue skies, things like that. But there are other options too. Contiguous.
Contiguous, meaning touching.
Yeah. If contiguous is checked, it only selects similar colored pixels that are physically touching the pixel you clicked on. If it's unchecked.
It selects all pixels of that color range everywhere in the image, even if they're not connected.
You got it. Useful if you want to select, say, all the red spots on a patterned shirt at once.
Okay, and anti-alias.
That just smooths the edge of the selection, helps avoid jagged, pixelated edges. Usually good to leave it on, though sometimes it can cause a tiny soft halo.
And sample all layers.
That tells the wand whether to look at colors across all your visible layers or just the layer you currently have active. Depends on your image structure.
And can you add or subtract with the magic wand?
Yep. Standard modifier keys usually work. Hold Shift and click to add another color area to the selection. Hold Alt or Option and click to subtract a color area.
So best for areas with distinct, fairly solid colors.
Definitely its strong suit.
Okay, now for the really fancy stuff, the AI-powered tools. These sound like game changers.
They really can be, especially for common tasks. Select Subject is a big one. Came in around Elements 2020.
And it does what the name says?
Pretty much. You click the Select Subject button. It's often in the options bar for other selection tools or in the main select menu. And the software uses AI to analyze the photo and figure out what the main subject is.
Like a person or a dog or a car?
Yeah, it tries to identify the most prominent object and automatically draw a selection around it. One click.
Wow. How accurate is it?
Surprisingly good a lot of the time, especially if the subject is fairly well defined against the background.
But maybe not always perfect.
Not always, especially with complex backgrounds or tricky edges like flyaway hair, you might still need to refine it.
Using that refine edge feature again, probably.
Exactly. But as a starting point, it's incredibly fast.
Okay, and there was another one, the auto selection tool from a bit earlier.
Right. Auto selection tool from Elements 2018. It's a bit different. It needs a little guidance from you first.
How so?
You choose a basic shape tool within the auto selection options, like a rectangle or a lasso, and you draw a rough shape around the object you want.
So you give it a hint where to look.
Exactly. Once you've drawn that rough boundary, then the tool analyzes just within that area and tries to find the object's edges automatically.
Ah, okay, so it's semi-automatic.
Kinda, yeah. You guide it, then it does the edge detection within your guide. It also has add to and subtract from modes, so you can clean up its results right there with the same tool.
And its success depends on how good your initial shape is and the edges inside.
Pretty much. Clear edges within your drawn area work best.
And then even newer AI options like Select Sky and Select Background, especially in the latest versions.
Yeah, they've added more dedicated one-click solutions. Select Sky does exactly what it sounds like, finds and selects the sky.
That must be amazing for landscape photographers. Swapping skies, adjusting just the sky.
Incredibly useful for that. Makes sky replacements or adjustments super fast. And Select Background is similar.
How does that work? Does it find the background directly?
Well, effectively, it finds the subject first using that Select Subject AI, and then it automatically inverts the selection for you.
So it's like doing select subject, then select inverse, but combined into one click.
Exactly. It's just a convenient shortcut for a very common task, isolating the background.
Where do you find these buttons?
Usually in the tool options bar, often near the auto selection tool, or also listed in the main select menu. Again, they're AI, so sometimes they might need a little tweak with refine edge, especially around hair or trees against the sky.
But still, these one-click options, subject, sky, background, sound like they handle a lot of the most common selection jobs incredibly quickly.
They absolutely do. It's a huge leap in efficiency and accessibility, leveraging that AI to understand the image content for you.
Okay, wow. We have covered a ton of ground on selections in Photoshop Elements.
We really have, from the basic idea of isolating areas.
Right through to these quite sophisticated AI tools.
Yeah, we went from simple shapes with marquees to tracing with lassos, painting selections, picking colors with the wand.
And then the automated magic of select subject, sky, background, and the guided auto selection.
The whole toolkit.
And I think the big thing for you listening is, like we said at the start, understanding why you'd pick one tool over another.
Right. Is it a geometric shape? Use a marquee. Freehand tracing needed. Lasso. Big area of solid color. Magic wand might be quickest. Need to isolate a person fast? Try select subject.
It's about matching the tool to the job and knowing the level of control.
Definitely. It all builds up to give you precise control over your edits.
So really, for you at home, the best thing to do now is just try them out.
Experiment. Open some of your own photos. Play with the lassos, see how the quick selection feels. Test out select subject on different pictures.
Find what works best for you and the kind of images you edit. Because getting good at selections, it really unlocks everything else in photo editing, doesn't it?
It's absolutely foundational. Master selections and you can do almost anything.
It opens up so many creative doors. So maybe the final thought to leave you with is, with all these tools now hopefully clear in your mind, what's the first thing you're going to select and transform in one of your images?